So we're looking, no, yeah, you're good. So look at the Intro to Parabolas paper. So we're going to talk about some of the specific names that you find in parabolas. Okay, the first definition is zeros. What are zeros? It's that little circle, right? Okay, now the most important thing you're going to learn in this class this year, it deals with quadratics. That is the most important topic you'll see this year because it's something you see over and over and over. When you get to calculus, you'll be doing quadratics all the time. Okay? And the most important thing you will learn about quadratics is finding what are called zeros. Okay? You know them better as x-intercepts. What are x-intercepts? Where the curve crosses the x-axis. So this is crossing the x-axis. Now, when we refer to x-intercepts, do we name it as a point or as a single number? So do I say the x-intercept is 3, 0, or do I say the x-intercept is 3? So we need to decide. Why do you vote just 3? Okay, so if we said the x-intercept is 3, does that guarantee it's on the x-axis? Yes. And what is the y value on the x-axis? It's always 0. So we'd actually be wasting our time to labeling the whole point, because it's always going to be like 6, 0, or -5, 0. So when we talk about x-intercepts, we just give the x value only. X value only, because the y value is always 0. And we deal with this so much that we've just decided in mathematics, hey, just label the number. But zeros also have other names. So they're called zeros. They're called x-intercepts. You'll also hear the word roots. And that's one you're going to hear a lot. Depending on what we're doing, I'll call them roots or I'll call them zeros, or sometimes they're referred to as solutions. But they all mean exactly the same thing. So if I say the equation has 3 roots, that's the same as saying it has 3 zeros. Okay? And I will just use all of those words interchangeably, and you just have to remember that they all mean the same thing. Now, you ask, why would you name it so many different things? Well, in some cases, calling them a zero makes more sense because you're actually finding where it equals 0. And sometimes you call them roots because that's the part of the equation where, have you ever planted a potato? Potato's a root, right? You stick it in the ground and it grows. So you can actually grow equations using these values. And we'll get to that later. It's the number you plant in the ground and it grows an equation tree. I don't know. It's your potato. Okay, what is a y-intercept? Crosses the y-axis. So it's where the graph crosses the y-axis. Do we want to label it as a point or as a single number? Okay, we believe in symmetry in mathematics. If you know it's on the y-axis, is there any point in saying x equals 0? No. If you know it's a y-intercept, you should also know that x is 0, so we label the y-intercept as a single value. Now, you do have to be careful. You can't just say, oh, the answer is 6. You have to say y equals 6. And when you talk about roots, you need to say x equals 5. You can't just say 5. Okay? Okay, vertex. Anybody want to take a guess what the vertex of a parabola is? And that's actually, so she said angle of the slope. Does a parabola have a slope? It's a changing slope, right? It keeps getting steeper and steeper and steeper. And in fact, calculus is actually half of calculus. Calculus has two parts. The first half is how steep is a graph. That's it. You now have passed the first half of calculus. How steep is the graph? Well, this graph gets steeper and steeper and steeper. How steep is the graph right there? It's pretty steep, right? If you're driving a car up this hill and back down the other side, right here, you're aimed way high, right? What happens as you continue to drive? Gets less steep. So the direction you're traveling is the slope of the car at any particular point, and that slope changes. What happens when you get to the top of the hill? You better have some brakes, but the slope is flat. So we started at negative slopes. We get to the top and it's flat, and what happens when we go down the other side? Now they're positive slopes, and that's all calculus is, the first half. It's can you measure the slope of a graph at any point? And with polynomials, it's really easy. With other graphs, it's much, much harder. Okay, so vertex. What do you think a vertex is? Or minimizes. So it's the point of the maximum or the minimum, or some people refer to it as where the graph changes directions, but it is a point. So it's the point of direction change. Okay? When we label the vertex, we label it as an xy coordinate, as a point. Okay? So, what about maximum or minimum? Can it have a maximum and a minimum? It's one or the other, right? It either has a maximum or it has a minimum. It can't have both. Not, at least a parabola can't. Other graphs can, but not a parabola. Okay? Should we label the maximum value as an xy coordinate or as just something else? So when we say maximum, what does the word maximum mean? The biggest. So is there a point that's bigger than all others? Yeah, there are an infinite number of points, and the x's and the y's are different, and sometimes x could be really big and y would be really small. So when we say maximum, what are we usually referring to? The highest or the lowest, and is that an x value or a y value? A y value. So this would be largest or smallest, depending on the graph, y value. So the vertex is a point, but everything else on this paper is either just an x or just a y. Okay, so looking at that first graph, what are the zeros? X equals -2 and 2. Don't just write -2 and 2. It's x equals -2 and 2. Okay? What is the y-intercept? 4. We don't need the 0. We don't need 0, 4. It's just 4. Okay? What is the vertex? 0, 4. Vertices, that's plural for vertex. Vertices are given as a point. You need an x and a y. Okay, does this have a maximum or a minimum? A maximum at y equals 4. So the maximum is y equals 4. Now, it just so happens that the vertex and the maximum and the y-intercept are all in the same place. That's not always going to happen. And what if the graph has a 0, a root, that's not a whole number? What should we do? After you cry, what should you do? Just give your best guess. If you think it's 4.87621, You're more accurate than me. I would say 4.8. Okay? So you have a couple minutes to fill out that paper and then hand everything in. Yeah.